Shumei Artist Symposium. And I think everybody's been here before, except maybe, have you been here before? Yeah. Have you been here before? No?
I've been to a music
We
show
should
start here
before, but not.
Music show. Well, I'll make it brief then. Sort of what Shumei is about, and which is Shumei is a spiritual group that originated in Japan, and has spread out to many places in the world, actually. And their premise is kind of what I call a three-legged stool. One of the legs is natural agriculture. That's food prepared without any chemical fertilizers or chemical pesticides. That's actually a little purer than organic food, but it has the same idea that it could be healthier for you. The other one is, or the other one of the two is Jorei. It's a spiritual, essentially kind of a healing and technique, or anyways, a spiritual practice for the purpose of purification and happiness, essentially. And the third one is why we're here today, and that is fostering the appreciation of art and beauty. And years ago, I think about 2004, we started doing symposia with that in mind. And we have sometimes new artists who's never presented a program before, some in the intermediate stages of their careers and so on, and some very well established. And the idea is to expose art to the public, and for the young artists to maybe for the first time help them, give them a purpose, to a reason to kind of put into words what it is they do and why they do it. And when I was a young chap and was first asked to speak, that was like kind of a strange thing to me, to try and put into words what it was that I do, because it came somewhat naturally. And anyway, today we have Paula Hudson. She's got her work in Crestone Gallery and something it's shown in Denver right now, is that correct, or gallery?
It's Artwork Network.
Artwork
Network.
Artwork Network.
Imagine.
And Paula has moved to Crestone 2 years ago, been working here. She has studied and taught at the University of Denver, has a master's degree and a PhD in speech and language.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't they kind of the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
No?
Yep.
Okay, well maybe you can enlighten me sometime during your talk or afterwards. So anyway, we're very happy to have you today. Give a Shumei Art Symposium. Thank you.
Pat's sitting next to me, and after that comment about aren't they the same thing, she giggled because she's an audiologist, which means she works with ears, right? And we went to school together and have known each other for 40 some odd years. Yeah. No, speech and language are two different things. Speech is how you say it. Language is what you say. Okay, so if you've got a little boy who does wabbits, he sees wabbits on the road, that's speech. If you've got somebody who talks and then but never, and he did what? This is the way I always, but I didn't want to. That's language. Whoa, you understood every word. But you didn't understand the meaning. It wasn't it, right? Okay. That's what I did for 45 years. But I started painting when I was in 3rd grade. So I've been painting a long time. My 3rd grade teacher, her name was Mrs. Bickmeyer. Like that? Can you tell how scared I was? My mom said, "You got Mrs. Bickmeyer." And I went, "What? Oh my God, I'm just scared from her name." Anyway, I had Mrs. Bickmeyer, and this was in Chicago. And one day we had time extra and nothing to do. She couldn't think of anything. So she had put small reproductions of various paintings along the top of the classroom. And one of them was Bruegel. And in the painting, he was Dutch, and in the painting there's this little, very early 18th century, I think, 18th century, sled with 2 little kids going down a hill. And so I took out my notebook and I sat there and I drew it, because we could do whatever we wanted, right? 3rd grade. And I drew it. And she came by and she said, "Who gave you that?" And I said, "I know what I'm doing." My God. And that was my first encouragement. I didn't know if it was really bad, but I was very much encouraged in 3rd grade. So I kept painting. I got 3 degrees. I worked with children for 45 years, children and adults, with speech and language difficulties, and I taught in university. And my specialty in what I did my PhD on was children who are gifted with disabilities. And they are a fascinating crew. I had one of my favorite kids now has a little boy himself, and David, father, when he was 8, he was profoundly deaf. One of my clients, and we were sitting there working on something, and he looked at me and he said, "You can't do this." And I said, he's 8, right? And I'm understanding, not clear speech. He says, "You can't do this." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because you're not as smart as I am." And he wasn't. And it's definitely true. But what I did then was I found new activities he hadn't seen before. I practiced with them and learned how to cheat. And then I won. So I could keep him kind of where I needed him to be, and not so he wouldn't get really arrogant. So anyway. Okay, so I was in the 3rd grade. I painted all my life, but I never had a chance to paint 5 hours every day. Now I can, or I can paint more than that. And the thing I noticed, learning a lot about painters and reading about painters and watching movies, is that if you're a professional painter, you can basically paint in any style. It doesn't matter what you are as a painter. So you can be representational, or you can be abstract, or you can be impressionistic, or you can be expressionistic. It is what you choose. Those of you in the audience who are artists, do you feel that way? Yeah. It is that you learn techniques and you learn principles of painting, and it allows you to go on and then do anything in that realm that you want to do. And so that's kind of a starting way to explain why there's such variety on the walls. Because if you go from this area across, you'll see it's fairly representational, especially with the horses. You know exactly what that is. And it's kind of what you expect of a watercolorist, right? Well, these are all mine. And then as you move along, the work starts to change. And you get over in this area, and that doesn't look anything like a horse, but it's gone abstract. Well, the idea is that painters can paint in any style, but when they are professional and they show, you generally give a gallery only one style of art, one form, so that you have a signature. Your work looks enough alike that people can say, "Oh, I know who did that." But most artists have this big room somewhere with stacks of paintings that they don't have a gallery for. And I think that's extremely unfortunate, because there's a lot of work out there that isn't shown because of the need of the gallery owners to sell more paintings, and they wouldn't identify that with you. So I got the chance today, or this month, to show all kinds of things, but let me show you how that progressed. Okay, so I started with watercolors. I've been a watercolorist all my life. And this is pretty typical of the kind of watercolor that I do. Now, what I wanted to show you is, try and ignore the horses and look at the gold, and then look at the gold here. The way this painting started was with a wash, which is just what it sounds like, a big bowl of colored water. And I washed it like that, so that the heaviest gold was here, and it got lighter as it went down. Then, right in here, underneath these colors, is this color. So after I washed the gold in, I washed in the red. And then after I did that, I got another bowl of wash, and I started over here with blue, and I washed in blue. The reason you do that is to make the painting hang together. Your mind knows that's been done, whether you see it or not, and it makes the painting hang together. So that's where I started, and those washes were the first level, and then of course there's more washes, smaller washes in here, and then it gets into the detail, and of course, end up with 3 horses, all right? So I did watercolors for like 150 years, and then one day I said, I'm always doing this, just like my father. My father was always saying, what if, you know? One day he was well into his 70s, driving down a very wet road in Indiana, drove his VW Bug right off the road, flipped it over and dropped it in a ditch. His first response was to turn the car on. He said, well, I just want to see if it would work. As he's hanging upside down by the seatbelt. So I'm kind of that person. I'm kind of what if, okay? So I got into some oils, and I decided to see if I could use watercolor techniques with oils. And so, this is an oil, and what I did was, I washed in the blue, and I washed in the pink, and I washed in the yellow. And it worked. So I thought, well, that's really cool. I kind of like that. I like the way things were going. And I decided that obviously I could do whatever I wanted, no matter what the galleries wanted, okay? So I kept that idea in mind, and I did a lot of stuff like this. This is an oil. It's more or less a classic type approach with paint. And this one is a collage. Okay, so I got to playing a lot. And I could do all the different styles that we talked about. And I kept thinking about those washes. Those washes, I really liked those. And so I went from this into this. And I started really focusing on pouring and washing acrylic paint. This is a wash. This was all dark blue, and then I poured the turquoise in, and when it came together, the edges softened and made a nice transition. Very hard edge here, because I didn't put any water in there, and then I poured white and this wonderful purple in, and I just let it run. And then I came in over it and put in the gold. I let the gold run down and put in the fence. Okay? So I've gone from kind of a tight impressionism to a much looser kind of approach, and it's been really, really fun. One of the first ones I ever did was this one. I had taken 3 groups of children 3 times to see Chihuly, and I love Chihuly. And then I thought, well, I'm not going to make make any plastic or blow glass or anything, how could I do Chihuly? You know who Chihuly is? How could I do Chihuly paint? So I thought, well, he's translucent, so I'm going to have to use glazes. I'm going to have to use translucent paints. See, paints are opaque or translucent. That means they have different amounts of pigment and different grinds to the pigment. How fine is the grind? How rough is the grind? And all the paints are different. And they're not only different according to one producer, they're different according to different producers. So if you use Liquitex or you use you have to know the difference in the paints because you get a different effect. So this, when you come and look at it closely, you can see the pores and you can see the washes. This was actually purple, and I gotta tell you, this is like a cameo. This is a real cameo. I put complementary colors here. What happens? Anybody know what happens when you mix complementary colors?
You get gray.
Sorry?
The gray.
You get gray, or if you don't get exactly the complements, you get mud. Those are complements. One washed on top of the other. And they made a beautiful cord instead of mud, and I was very impressed with myself. Another thing in here is fun stuff. If you look at that, this little circle is clear. Part of it's clear. Well, that's because I took a medium and I just poured a little puddle of it on a piece of wax paper. So here's this clear medium, and then I dropped some red in it, and I dropped some blue in it, and I just let it sit there. And when it was completely dry, I peeled it off the wax paper, and I put it on paint, and now you can see through it, because the medium dries clear. I will tell you this, but I won't tell anybody else. That's from the inside of a paint can. But it was really wonderful. Yeah, it was just cute. It was perfect. I found some purple ones. I thought, well, if I can put them in more than one space, I'll just put them on there. So that's what that is. Also, you can see there's a cad orange in here, and magenta, or not magenta, pink, and all kinds of things going on. Here's another really, here I go again, I'm so proud of myself. See what these things mean? Can you imagine the mess that would be if that yellow didn't stop? And it stopped. I did it on purpose, you know. This painting took place in my studio. It was, I was looking for a level spot, you know, so the paint wouldn't roll off the canvas. And so I had it on a couple of raised cardboard boxes. So here it is laying flat. But of course, see that centerpiece where the canvas is, that's going to sag, right? If you put paint in it, and it's heavier in the center, so all your paint's going to go woo, right to the center. We can't have that. So I had levelers underneath, like pieces of wood, all right? So now this is getting really complex. This is like a Rube Goldberg, right? I got the boxes, I got pieces of wood, I got the canvas, and nothing's glued to anything else, so it's kind of just sitting there like this, okay? And I'm watching it, because I wanted to do this, and it's going to go some other direction if I don't watch it. I watched it for 2.5 hours, holding it, and tilting it like this, to get it to go where I wanted. And it was the first time I was very, very proud of myself, that I could get on the phone with somebody and say, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm watching paint dry." Because it was, really was. But that's how that happened. And when I did that and fell in love with that pouring and the way it mixed, I realized, boy, hey, I could do this in other ways. I kind of like this. Let's do it in other ways, you know. And I also figured out, if you level a table, you don't have to stand there for 2.5 hours and hold paint. It really works. So that's what happened in these. This one, particularly, and this one, is I had them on a level table, and there was a blue pour down here with a brown pour running through it, and then another blue pour that ran up in here. when I had the picture in my head, I came in and painted around the mountains and painted around the cloud with a lighter color, even though that's not where these edges really are underneath this blue paint. I made them. Yeah, I used to brush. This is a pour. This is painting around the white cloud so that I could make a tight edge there. And then up here where the darker clouds are, I did little pours and little bits of paint so that it would spread out and make a nice textural area. That's called stupa. Because I was out on the T road and look what's on the top of the cloud. It's a stupa. So there it was. When I poured this, it was all mostly white. There was a little gold in it. And when I saw it coming out, I thought, I can make that even nicer. And I came in with the glazes and just glazed where these edges are, where these spaces are, to make the cloud multidimensional. And this one May and I were just talking about. I told her, I said, I did it. I love it, and I don't think I can ever do it again. You know, because it was like, oh my God, how did I do that? Well, I figured it out. I told you that paints have different pigments. So you can have a heavily pigmented paint like a cadmium red, or you can have an azo yellow that is just really, really thin. Well, this phthalo blue was right out of the bottle. And it's not real thick, but it's kind of thick. It's kind of like this. The white is called a flow paint, and it's just like water. Well, I don't know what I'm doing, so I put all the blue down, right? And I take my white, and I go like that, and things started to happen. It's just fabulous. So there I am again at the table, I'm holding it like this. You know, watching it, see what it would do. And it did that. I had to move, I had to help it a little bit. I had to bring it this way because it was starting to settle all over here, the sky. And if you've looked at paintings that are off balance, you kind of feel like you want to do this, you know, because the weight is on one place in the painting, one side of the painting. So I brought it over here with various techniques, like I squirted it with water, and then I push it with the brush like this, and then I pick it up with a tissue so it get real, real white, and then get my hand out of the way so it would come back into it. But I did figure out how I did it so I can do it again. It is the fact, again, of the density of the paints. And you have to be aware of that. I like to think of painting as a symphony. You as an artist are producing that symphony while you're painting. Everything's happening at once in your head. And if you do it right when you're done, you have a total symphony. You can see the little notes, you can see the big notes, you can see the themes, you can feel the rhythm. If you've done it right, it's like a symphony. So, I got into pouring. Here's another one. That one was really fun. Because at first, it looked like, this is called And My Boat Is So Small. It was, when I worked at the health department, it was, there was a little poster with two little stick figures in a boat on a giant ocean. And the phrase was, the ocean's so large and my boat is so small. And every time I look at that place out on T Road, I feel the same way. It's like, can you imagine building that little log thing and looking around you and thinking, holy Naples, I'm the only one out here in this huge, expansive world. So I wanted to get that feeling, and I put the house, made the little thing very small, and put in the big white cloud again to emphasize that the building is very, very small. The only problem was my gold lines, which I really like to give, you know, gives it interest, gives it movement. They came down like this, and it looked like the little house was on fire. which to me wasn't really pleasant. You know, I didn't want the little house to be my little boat in this huge ocean and have it be on fire. So I had to get rid of those, and I did that by overpainting those streaks and just kind of making them disappear. Okay? And then, of course, the flower, which is one of my favorites because of the background. That was fun. There are 3 layers in the background. When you come up and look at it, you'll see that one of them is a red violet, right here. And the next layer is this lighter color, white gray. And the next layer is this. And in order to do that, you have to think in the negative. In other words, you're painting from, you're starting to paint the layer that's way out there. Then you step forward and you paint a little layer closer to you. And then you step forward and you paint another layer closer to you. And in order to do that, you've got to hold that in your head. You're looking at it in the negative. Okay, these are on copper. I'm also going to start doing some on brushed aluminum. I think I'm going to do some pours like these on brushed aluminum. I think they'll be really a lot of fun. The raven is on copper, and the copper isn't sealed. So what I'm hoping to do is that the raven, the copper color will change color. And it'll age like copper does. So it will become, first of all, this really horrible kind of brown, which then becomes this kind of really gorgeous eggplant, which then becomes what you think of when you see copper and it patinas, the green sage color, but it goes through several iterations before it gets there. So it's kind of nice to have that hanging on your wall, and you watch it change over the time that it's hanging there. Pouring, I can use it with representational things. There they are. The flowers, the orchid, the buffalo, and the owl. So pouring this new technique I'm using, I can use it in all kinds of ways. So here's a new one that's coming along. This is kind of fun. Oh good, I'm stuck. What I did was, I just painted some green, 2 greens. A really light acidy green and a what's called a Jenkins green. I let them mix together, and I turned the canvas and moved it around, you know, to get it to do that. And then I thought, well, I think what I'll do is I'll make this flowers because it's spring. All right? And so, just for fun, because I'm always experimenting, I did some pours on a piece of acrylic to see what it would look like. And I think it's going to work. I'll use do something else with this. But I think these colors are going to work. I think it's going to be really nice floral. Okay?
Did you just pull those off and put them on?
No, see, because I put a layer of medium before I drop the flowers into it. So it's kind of, the whole thing's glued. Okay? Plus, the medium, I learn something new every day. Medium didn't dry clear because it was too thick. So I really am going to use this for something else. I'll probably bury it. You ought to look at these edges. Just look at the way these edges, I'm going to pass this around. Look at these things. Look what they do. Is that not funny? Okay, so you look at those edges. They got over here. Oh, look at this one. Now this one I haven't figured out what to do with yet, and so this is a good one to start the next piece. How many people like abstract painting? Oh, too many of you. I knew you guys living in Creston would like abstract. Okay. Here's a pour. That's all I've done is the pour. First layer. Could be anything we want. right? If you look at it though, Pat and I were looking at it, I get stunned by the tree that's already here. You see it?
I like the bear.
You like the bear? Where's the bear? Could be.
It is.
It's a cedar, the cedar trees.
Uh-huh. It's pretty much a tree, but if you turn it this way, it's a waterfall. So I can't decide where it's gonna go. Now the trick is, the challenge here is, there's so many nice little things going on. Even the holes it made. You see the holes? What do I do for the next coat and not lose any of the good stuff? Maybe I'll just paint it clear and sell it like this. When you get one like this, you know, they sit around forever and you're just looking at it and going, oh, what am I gonna do? All right. Here's one that I started a new thing. I have another new thing. I was doing this with the matte medium in acrylics, and then I saw this guy Riley on YouTube who does these fabulous pours, and he pours into and on resin. So I thought, well, how hard can that be? Oh, I got myself some resin, and I put down a coat of white, then I put down a layer of resin, and then I dropped the paint into the resin. Now, you know resin dries clear, okay? You all know what resin is? Everybody? All right. So I dropped the paint into the resin, and this is what happened.
Is it wet or is it dry?
Wet.
The resin was wet.
The resin has to be wet, or you won't get those edges. You know how it is when it's spring? I would love to be painting like a landscape, but it comes out flowers. So this one's almost done. The only thing I'm going to do is bring in either a split complement or a complement, because I was in one of my manic phases and I got some pretty obvious brush lines which I don't want. So what I'm thinking is I'll do a split complement or a complement really, 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 really grayed down and drop in some very dusty violet right here, as though it were background. So I have to be really careful so I don't run over my foreground. But it was kind of fun. I mean, if you get a hold of that, you can see where the resin is. Now, the resin isn't complete on there. It didn't go over the whole surface, so I'll put another coat on one side so that it has a nice, it didn't go to the edge on one side. So then I decided, well, let's try some more stuff with resin. I mean, why not? Sometimes I can't keep up with myself. And I did this. Now the reason the light's here is that if you look at it, it's in layers, and you can actually tell that the green is laying over the gold and the red. Where it looks stringy, where the strings are. I took some yellow, I think it was, might be an azo, I don't know, but it was like a medium pigment, you know, a little bit opaque, but not, you know, 100% opaque. I dumped a little bit of paint, that yellow, that stringy stuff. I dumped it into a little cup of resin, and I stirred it, just a little bit. And I noticed I was getting these strings. Well, I mean, you know, the first response is, beat the hell out of it. Let's see if we can get it all mixed in. I just stopped. I said, no, let's just see what happens. So instead of continuing to mix it, I poured it the way it was. And it came out as little strings. Now, when I pass this around, if you look, Right here where this wonderful watermelon is, under the green, you can really see the fact that it has layered itself. Okay? So before I give it to you, one more thing. All right, abstractionists. How many people hate abstraction, don't want to look at it? How many people, the first thing you do when you look at an abstraction, you say, that looks like. All right, don't do that.
Thank you.
When you look at an abstraction, look at the color. Look at the color, okay? Look at the color. You like the color? You don't have to like the paint. Do you like the color? Think about others you've seen. You don't have to think about this one. But do you like the color? That's the first thing I did. I said, yeah, I like that color. I do. I'm going to turn it this way. I like that color. I like all those colors. I have no mud. Colors didn't mix badly. Okay. Now remember, you're not trying to figure out what it is yet. It's an abstract. Now, you looked at the color. Now look at the edges. You see edges? Right? Sure you do.
Sure.
Where one color ends. Are some of them fun? They have little holes in them, and little bubbles, and little thingamabobs going on because of the resin. All right, so that's two things. You might like the color, you might like the edges. Okay? Is it balanced? Are all the reds on one side and all the greens on the other side? Greens pretty much spread everywhere, isn't it? Reds? Little bitty fun ditzy little things up there, but it's red. I mean, that counts. Okay, so you've got color, edges, balance, design. Do you like the big spaces versus the little spaces? Every painting, the first thing you do when you look at it, you say yin and yang. Does it have a big space? Yes. Where's the little space? Does it have a bright color? Yes. Does it have a dim color? Does it have a sharp edge? Does it have a soft edge? Because yin and yang is what makes your eye so happy. Okay. Color value. Are some of the colors intense and some of them not as intense? Okay. So you can go and you look for these qualities: the balance, the design, the composition. A lot of abstract paintings don't necessarily have an L-shaped composition or a V-shaped composition. They're more design. They're all over the board. So you look at color, you look at line, you like the edges, you look at the shapes, big and small, you look for yin and yang. You don't ever have to say, gosh, that looks like. All you have to do is think of those elements. And you cannot like the painting fine, but you could come away and say, boy, I like that color. That's how I look at abstract. Okay, one last thing, and then you're free to go and buy paintings, is I thought I would pour on here. And then I have to leave it here because I can't carry it. But I'm going to pour some flowers on this. And I'm going to let it lay here so you all can watch them form themselves. Okay? So if you want to come up here, that's great. If you don't, that's fine too. You can see it when it's done. You can see it right now. Now, these different kinds of mediums make the paint do different things. Like if I put these, I know now since I've been doing it, if I put those on there, just the way that is, they're going to form some kind of a very sharp edge space. And that's okay. That's okay. That's what happened in the flowers back there. And then if I drop this in the center, because it's wet, it's going to just move in really interesting ways. But if I use water on here, or if I use alcohol, or if I use spray paint, or if I use any number of different kinds of mediums, the paint goes nuts. It has a fun time. So what I want to do, what I thought about for this painting is, starting up here, because we're going to end up with an L-shaped composition, kind of like that, I think. So I want a big flower here, and I want it to be really interesting. So instead of just pouring the whole thing, I'm going to do a circle to get it a little closer so it doesn't take forever. And leave the center dry. Now let's start with a yellow one.
Was that just water spray?
Yeah, that was water. And let it start to move.
And what is the yellow?
Yellow is an acrylic. It is not a flow paint, but it's a fluid, meaning that's what they're called.
So you haven't done anything to it?
No. And you can hear it. It's
Thick.
cream.
It's in water.
Cream. Nope.
No, what's
just
the
paint.
liquid?
Oh, this is water.
No, what makes the pigment liquid?
I don't know what they put in acrylics. Anybody know what the base is?
This is acrylic.
It's glass.
Yeah.
Well, you know they do all kinds of chemicals. It's not water. I mean, it's just some sort of plastic.
It's acrylic.
Yeah, the pigments are suspended in their little mix. Okay, now we're gonna put this guy in here.
And what is that?
That is quinacridone magenta, and it is a high flow. So this is like water. I didn't add anything to it. Okay, so there's different thicknesses of paint you can get. And you can see that this is thicker. The yellow is thicker. See how it's sitting? Now, I like that. You see it's up here too, where the yellow didn't quite all spread. This, by the way, I really liked. It's called In One Flower of the Universe. Now we can rock this and watch the paint move. Okay, I think that's going to be fun. See, now what I have is I have air holes. This is really important in watercolor. You're always told, you don't draw a tree. It's not a clump of color. When you look at a tree, you can see the sky through the tree. If you're a beginning watercolorist and you paint a tree and it's all one color, it's like, there are no sky holes. Well, I've got sky holes in the flower, and I've got sky holes in the greenery at the bottom. So that kind of lets your mind have that feeling like you're not trapped in it. You can go through it. You can go around it. You can climb out of it. And that's really important. That's why if you're a painter, only if you're challenging yourself do you draw a circle in the middle of your painting and paint that circle. Because your eye cannot escape it. It's death to do that if you're a painter. Unless you then place a whole bunch of other stuff around it that gets the person out. People don't like to be trapped when they're looking at a painting. They want to be able to wander through it. And a bullseye doesn't let you wander. So anyway, we'll do this guy, and we'll do another one here, and another one there, and probably one right there, and maybe some colors from this back in there, so it looks as though there's a flower behind the green. Okay. Oh, also, this is kind of fun. May and I were doing this. Sometimes this doesn't work. Let's see. Oh boy, are those getting nice. Let's see if I can do this. Just drag it a little bit. There. So I paint with sticks, tissues, rags, my fingers, occasionally a paintbrush, the other end of the paintbrush, and water, and you can see how much fun that is. Look at this, how purple that is, and look what happened when I got down there. See that nice color shift? Isn't that fun? So have the fun of painting, just standing there and looking at it. What you think?
So when you use alcohol instead of water as your spray, do you know in advance what the difference is gonna be?
Oh, yeah, it's very different. Remember the stupa painting? The ground, the dark blue, that has alcohol in it, the dark blue at the bottom.
Okay.
I dropped alcohol into that. See the difference?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And it's also different in how you balance the water. If you put water and alcohol together, it's a difference. And how much water, and how little water, and how much alcohol. It's, I think what I've learned is the more you know
How about that?
your materials, the more successful you're going to be. And I've been painting since I was in 3rd grade, so I've got a pretty good idea about the materials. And that'll move for the whole time now until it dries out. So feel free to walk around and buy paintings and then come back and have a look and see where it's going.
Very cool.
Any questions?
I have just one, on this one, when you poured with oil, did you use turpentine, or what did you use? What did you mix it with?
My husband had emphysema, so I used water-based oils. And that one was actually done with water.
Okay.
But I've discovered that if you get really crazy with it, with the pouring technique, when you use the heavily pigmented oils, they will break up in a really nasty way. Because the water doesn't dissolve those pigments or let them cling together. So I got online, I went to Jerry's, and I found actually it's called a water-based oil thinner. And what it does is it just thins that paint down, and it's just gorgeous, just beautiful. And that's what I used in the stupa.
And no smell?
No smell. No. I used it in here. The thinning, that's how I thinned the paint.
Do you ever drop alcohol on top of the paint?
Sure. Yeah. What'll happen is if you dropped alcohol right now, it would push the paint out. It really gets nice. I mean, you end up with this big circle. And it's got color in it because pigment stained the canvas. But it makes this edge, kind of almost a round edge, unless you've done something else in there, like put water in there and then it screws the
So
alcohol up.
interesting.
I was trying to think if it was in here anymore. I thought, I don't think so. Any questions? Come to my house and paint sometime. It's fun. I love it.
I figured. So have you been painting ever since 3rd grade? Or did you like take time out to do?
No, I painted. I was, unfortunately, I hate the label, I was a weekend painter. But I always painted. It was hard though, you know, I'm 73, and in the era when I was in the 20s and 30s, I actually had to fight to have studio space. I mean, I had to have a bat in my hand and say, listen, see that space over there? That's mine. Or else, you know, it was so easy to get lost and to say, oh, well, this isn't important anymore. But I'm one of those people that I actually would get short of breath. I'm serious. I know this is stupid. But if I couldn't paint for a while, I actually got short of breath. It was like, yeah, I really need to do this. It's just part of who I am.
And are you self-taught?
Yeah. I have 250 classroom hours, but no degree. With a huge majority of them are watercolors. And Stephen Kohler, I took a class from Mr. Kohler, who was down in Crete. Long time ago.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, you know, let's push this over. Let's see it. By the way, if you ever want to buy these paints, put the word Jerry's into your computer and go look at his stuff. I've used it for like 4 years, and he has some of the best prices around.
Where is
In, I think, South Carolina. Is that Golden? He has all kinds of stuff. Liquitex, Golden. Yeah, no, I mean the brand. I use all kinds.
Oh, that one's cool.
I like Golden because I know what the pigment's gonna do. So I like Golden. I like Liquitex for heavier painting because it comes in jars, and if you put out too much, you can scrape it back in the jar. And I'm cheap, so I like scraping it back in the jar. You know?
Mild.